Okay, more work on the car continues. This is an old school type video. It's definitely two idiots again. Although I'm not gonna hit myself in the face with a hammer this time. Did you see that?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Before we go onto the front suspension, we're gonna be finishing up the rear. If you guys remember in that video that I'm referencing, I hit myself in the face with a hammer because the hardware we had wasn't right, and so we were trying to make it work, and we were trying to hammer things in place, and bad things happened. But I have the proper hardware now, so I figured I might as well at least give Nick the enjoyment of working with U-bolts and leaf springs and all that crap. But what we're gonna also be installing today, Hotchkiss front upper lower A-arms, Hotchkiss sway bar, new end links, new ball joints, tie rods are fine. Those are actually replaced along with tie rod sleeves. Shocks, all new hardware. What am I missing here? I think that's it. Oh, and then rear shocks, obviously. Now it's funny, the shocks that I went with, it's actually the Hotchkiss Street Sport 1.5s, but they're made by Fox. So apparently I can jump the car. What's funny is like shock installation on this car is not really a one-man job because you have to tighten the bolts and they're in the trunk. So they're all the way up there. So the reason this is a two-man job is as the shock mount goes up in there, it goes into the trunk. So I've got my second man over there.
What's up?
Literally doing nothing but reaching in as far as he can. Because look at the distance he has to reach from there all the way to there. Are your arms long enough? Because mine barely reached.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you're still, so.
There's rust in that trunk, so whatever you do, don't crawl in it. I don't trust that you won't fall through onto the tank, into the gas tank.
Good to know.
All right, so we got it threaded in at the top. We had to loosen it up a little bit though, because it's at an angle where, if you look here, the body goes up like that, but the shock has to come down, and there is kind of like a little tray it sits in that allows it to pivot. But because they're poly urethane, and because we still have to get it in the lower shock mount, we just mounted it loose. But as you can see, it doesn't line up with the hole right there, but I have two options. I could put the jack under here and jack the shock up slightly to put it in, or jack up the differential, remove the jack stand, so let the differential come down. I think I'm gonna use the jack to push the shock up, see if that'll work. It's one thing you gotta know about leaf spring rear ends. You can support the jack, or the differential and the axle. But that's also your subframe. Your leaf springs are your rear subframe. So if you are working on U-bolts and stuff, don't make the mistake of only jacking up the differential and not putting points under the body as well, and no, they're not Harbor Freight jack stands. Stop with that shit. Anyway, what'll happen is as you loosen the U-bolts, the jack will, or the axle will just keep going up, and the car will keep coming down because you're literally disassembling the rear subframe when you do that. So if you're working on rear ends that are leaf spring, this is truck, car, van, spaceship, whatever, make sure you support the body because you're disassembling its structure. All right, so the shock is on. You can see we've got it mounted up there. It's mounted down here. And what's interesting about this particular shock, it's definitely shorter in that it doesn't let the rear end come down as far. Because you know, it's the shock that controls the travel. The shock, when you lift your car in the air and the wheels stop, it's the shock body that bottoms out up here. So this piston comes up and hits the top, and that's what keeps it from drooping so far. This is definitely not as droopy as the other one. Now I know a lot of people are already going, well, Jay, that's because that's a shock designed for a lowering spring. And yes, this is a 1-inch lower spring on here as well, but I don't think it's gonna keep the wheel from going down where we want it. And I'm probably gonna actually lower this car another inch in the back. I haven't decided yet if I'm gonna do it with a lowering shackle or a block. My worry about the block is axle wrap. So if you move the differential up an inch from the spring, which it's mounted to, that gives it more fulcrum or leverage to wrap. We do have the Calvert traction bars on here, obviously, which will locate the rear end and keep it from moving as much. But I also don't know if lowering shackles for this car are an issue either, because if you lower it at the end, all the way back here, which means where it mounts, it's up higher, that could potentially pull the axle towards the rear of the car a little bit and then no longer be centered in the fender. That's why going with a 4-link or something like that would be way more simple in that, well, it'd be simple once it's installed, but it's quite the modification of the car to get it installed. You've got to weld all kinds of framework in there. You've got to weld reinforcements. It's just, everything is different. So I'm gonna tighten this shackle back up. We're gonna do the other side. We're not gonna film that. You guys have already seen how the U-bolts work. And then we'll get started on the front end. So that went really painless, actually. Nick saw with the right hardware, it went right together. Important lesson of Don't try and force wrong crap to work and then hurt yourself. Just stop, order the right stuff. Like New Kids on the Block, man, the right stuff. So now that the car's back on the ground, we can tighten the traction arms and the rear shackles, flip the car around, and then start the purpose of today's video. So this is being set up for drag, okay? Like I said, the ZZ6 is coming out. It's about 405 horsepower, it's no slouch, but the suspension on this guy is tired though. Look at those arms. Whoever put this battery in put it in backwards, and then when the way they wired it up, they got the negative over here and the positive right under the metal. So without a battery hold down, if I hit a bump, it would be like So that's why this rubber piece is also there. We will be relocating that to the trunk eventually. All right, I gotta flip the car around, I gotta take this bolt out, and we gotta start taking the front apart.
Oh boy.
So we gotta make sure that the car is completely in the garage. That way, when we don't get done today, I can shut the garage door.
Okay. Oh boy.
That was just a washer, it's fine.
You say that now, and then it like somehow ends up in the engine.
Works.
Yeah.
I don't want to dirty up my new Sparko wheel. Which is, yeah, put a little piece of foreign in this car.
The only bit of foreign.
It looks good though.
It does look good.
I thought the retro styling of it would go really well.
I think what makes it pop is the machined parts on it.
And that's what I liked about it.
Yeah.
I might change the seats, to be honest. These offer no support in terms of bolstering, but
I don't think he told you this. First time I was riding in it, whenever he accelerated, that seat will just go straight back. Like,
well, yeah, so let me explain why. The plastic cover on the other side wasn't allowing the lever to come all the way down. So it was stopping like right there. So the teeth barely had anything to bite onto. So every time I would accelerate it, he would just end up in the back seat. I fixed it, okay?
Okay, that's
it never happened with Jenny though, because she doesn't weigh as much as us.
Okay.
Look.
Oh, jeez. This is worse than the Z.
Yeah, the Z has less knee room. So if I took the knee room from this and the leg room from the Z, or the headroom for the Z, I'd be perfect. Pump, pump. Hey.
Out the way.
Okay.
Wow. It even sounds old.
You know one of the reasons why we accelerated the engine going in this too? Front crank seal's leaking.
Oh, great.
So can I talk about this real quick? A lot of people are like, why'd you go with the new wheel? I like the bigger, thinner wheels. First of all, the stock wheel for this thing is like this big, okay? I'm really tall. I have a tilt column, thank God. But if I go with a bigger wheel, like the OEM ones, they'll hit my legs.
Okay,
This car was undercoated, which is fine because the frame would be in much worse condition if it wasn't. See, it's all flaking off. There's surface rust on there, obviously, but all the metal's there. I'm not worried about this at all. Hotchkiss actually sells the whole front subframe assembly with their arms already on it, their sway bars, their springs, their shocks, spindle. They painted this car with the brake pads on. Anyway, and the reinforced, reconditioned factory subframe with the or poly mounts and stuff for the body. And I was telling Nick, when I do the body work on this car, instead of trying to take this all apart, disassemble everything, media blast this, I think I want to buy the Hotchkiss assembled one because it's $5,800. And I know that sounds like a lot of money, but if you start thinking about all the labor involved and the time at tearing this all apart, taking the engine off, transmission obviously, I had to do all that anyway with the new one, but then it's just the time to swap the parts over. And because this isn't like a numbers matching car or anything, which we've already talked about a bunch of times, I have no quarrel with switching this over to a different subframe. So I think I might go that route in the future. All right, so first things first, we gotta support the lower arm with the jack. We need to undo the shock mount up here. We've got to undo the tie rod right here. I have a theory here. This side measured 25.75 inches off the ground from the center of the arch, which my fingers are sticky, to the ground. The other side, 26.25. So it's half inch higher on the driver's side. I know these springs are weak. We've already seen what they do. I think I can get away without an alignment because I have a feeling the car is gonna settle right where it is now with the 2-inch drop. because these springs are not supporting the weight properly anymore. So we'll measure, and if it's anywhere close to the current measurement, then the alignment shouldn't be too far off. But I can't drive the car right now anyway, like I already said, because of the transmission being screwed up. I can't drive it like on the highway or anything. I'm not too worried about the alignment. Also too, I'm not gonna be taking the rotors off, because if you're not aware, unlike modern cars where it's a mounted on hub, and then the rotors and everything just mount to the stud that's part of the bolted in hub, this is a spindle, not a knuckle. So the difference, people get confused about this. A knuckle is the component that all the stuff mounts to, including that wheel hub that I just mentioned, like a 4-bolt wheel hub that mounts to it. A spindle means it's got the actual shaft coming out of the knuckle that the wheel bearing's attached to. So this is a spindle and not a knuckle, which that means is if I try and take off the rotor, inside the rotor are the wheel bearings. And I don't want to repack the wheel bearings. There's no play. I've already checked these wheels for play the other day. So I'm not going to be taking the rotor off, if you guys are wondering why. So any mechanics out there know exactly what I'm talking about. We've got good bearings, no reason to pop them out, break the rear seal, have to repack them and put new bearings in. I'm just going to leave them and hope for the best. Not to mention, look, this is the stock tie rod, or the stock sway bar right here, right? That's the new one. Well, because we're not running a rear sway bar, we want the biggest sway bar we can truly fit up front. Because the same logic with the Z.
Yeah.
Where's some wood? Quick, knock on it. It's hilarious to me though, how dinky the end link is and how tiny the sway bar is. Look, they even undercoated the sway bar.
They really undercoated everything, like the bracket.
Dude, I already said before, back in the 60s, you buy this baby today and I'll throw in the undercoating for free. I love this Milwaukee electric ratchet so much. Thank you, wifey, for getting that for me. For not Father's Day, for Christmas. They're not a sponsor though, so don't buy it.
No, but they're really good. I got one too.
That's a good sound when you're driving, right?
That's things you don't want to
You
hear.
go over a bump and you hear,
When you hit a bump and you hear like a dinner triangle.
dinner! People in the Midwest are so triggered that I call this a project cars. They're like, that's not, you come look at a car where I live. Look at the amount of rust on that car. Hey, if you don't have to deal with rust, I'm not gonna deal with it. This car was built in Van Nuys. I'm pretty sure it lived its whole life in California, which is why, with the undercoating. It did live at the beach though, so I think any of the rust that's on here truly was because of the salt from the beach. But still, that's because it doesn't have road salt to deal with like those snow climates. That's what makes them rust in those climates, it's the road salt. That's you versus the guy she says is just a friend.
The guy who helped her move when you were at work.
So if you've ever wondered how much your engine actually flexes, look up here. See that dent?
Yeah.
It was hitting up here. That's one of the reasons too why for doing an LS, like my builder was like, you have to go 2 reeler arms because you need the extra clearance for the headers and the engine mount and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's not just because I want better suspension, but I physically have to do the LS swap. Which, by the way, I think I've already said, but I can't remember if I did, but if I did, I'm saying it again. We ordered the block, the rods, the pistons, and all that stuff. The engine build will be starting very, very soon.
Are you using the same head gaskets or?
So because I don't have the shock hooked up on the top, remember I said earlier on the rear, the shock is what keeps it from traveling downward? Mm-hmm. And now that I'm undoing the bottom, if I didn't have this jack here right now, actually I guess nothing would happen because the knuckle or the spindle's still attached, but I'm undoing the shock now because if I tried to follow the instructions for either the top or the bottom, like the A-arms, the upper or lower, it wouldn't matter because I'm replacing both and I'm replacing the shock. So I'm just taking it out entirely first.
Oh, that was nice.
And now that the shock is out of there, I can do this. I can support the bottom of the A-arm by the thick material, because what we're gonna do next is we're gonna pop the tie rod off, and then we're gonna pop off the lower or the upper ball joint. I'm gonna replace the upper arm first.
Okay.
Get it all reattached, and then we'll do the bottom. And I know people are gonna be yelling, use a spring compressor, do it the right way. There is no way to get a spring compressor in here. You can't, because the arm,
Oh god. It's happening!
you cannot get those in here, physically. Impossible. Ask any mechanic that has ever changed springs on a first gen Camaro, and probably even a second gen Camaro. Maybe even a third gen. You cannot get spring compressors in there. Because this is so deep right here, the spring pocket is so deep, The energy loses all of its spring before it can even physically come out. So they should be fine. Should. All right, so this is a castle nut. This is the what holds on the tie rod. It's a rod coming through right here that then the castle nut goes down. The reason why they call it a castle nut is because it has these things on the top that look like the top of a castle or a rook in chess. Then you got this cotter pin. So what those do is that locks the cotter pin in place and keeps it from being able to come out. The cotter pin keeps the bolt from being able to come off, which means if this ever loosens, it won't come off the car. Because this is what controls the steering. It's kind of important. You also never, ever, 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 and I need to get a pick probably for this, reuse the cotter pin.
Okay.
On what?
Reusing cotter pins.
Oh, did you? Are you serious? I was trying to do this the lazy way and not take the calipers off, but we're gonna take the calipers off. Ah, that's the wrong way. Oh, got it. It did its job, yay! It's just like a giant version of a little cocktail fork, right?
Yeah. Could be those toothpicks that you at Costco.
See? So now let me tell you what would have happened though, had I not had the jack here. You saw the way it went.
Yeah.
It's because the spring is pushing it. So if that was able to just freely swing down, that could have had enough energy right now to fly out and hurt you.
Why'd you tell me to sit here again?
I'm in some line of fire too, man. All right. And the whole arm will come out. Hey.
Wow.
All right, so the new arm is on here. The header over here is really close to this part, so I have no doubt this header is gonna hit with engine articulation. See how close that is? It's even closer than that was where it was hitting. But to be honest, I don't care. It'll self-dent itself. This engine is coming out, I've said it a million times. When we do the LS kit, it will be centered in the engine bay. Once this is put back together, we have to grease both the front. There's Zerk fittings on there. Grease this ball joint. We'll be greasing the new ball joint in the bottom and adding more grease to this one right here. And if you're wondering how you add grease to this, and it may not need it actually, I think it was overfilled. You actually fill these with a needle. So there's a special needle fitting that goes on the end of my grease gun, and then you put it in through like a hypodermic almost. It's funny how it's like, new tubular arm, ugly stamped steel arm. So what we just did is roughly the same now for the bottom, only we have the spring to worry about now. So what we're gonna do is we're probably just not gonna show you guys the process of doing this. It's the same thing, get the cotter pin off, get the castle pin out, or the other way around. Cotter pin out, castle bolt off, or castle nut. You're a nut.
You're a nut too.
And then, so we'll just kind of fast forward through all this and we'll get to the point to where we're putting the new bolt and stuff in. If there's ever been a more important point of why you need cotter pins, it's this one. Check this out. That castle nut is loose. It's not tight at all. The only thing that kept it from coming out is the cotter pin doing its job. I've been making this joke all along because ever since Nick admitted that he reused cotter pins, I was like, you know, sometimes this is the only thing between you and like certain death. The nut, not only was the nut loose. Where the hell did Maddie go? Not only was the nut loose, but when I lowered the jack, the whole ball joint came down with it. So it was not attached anymore.
It was not attached.
It was not attached. This is literally the only thing that kept the lower control arm on.
That's pretty amazing. Imagine what a secondhand cotter pin could do.
My kid's riding her Power Wheels out there doing donuts in the driveway, so you're gonna hear a funky sound. Anyway, what I ended up doing was actually wrapping the blanket around the coil and leaving the U-bolt, or not the U-bolt, but the ball joint showing, and I put my foot on there and pushed it down. That way, the spring is all wrapped up in the blanket, which will act like a big shock absorber. And then when I pushed it down, it just went ping, and it couldn't fly nowhere because again, the blanket was so wrapped up in there. So that's how I got the spring out. As you can see now, I literally wrapped it through the coils to just absorb. There it is. Wow. So in terms of spring length though, look at that. I think the coil was tired.
Yeah, just a bit.
It's all.
I don't think that's factory. I really don't.
All right, so here's the new A-arm. Here's the old A-arm. As you can see, clearly a design difference. What's nice about this little spring perch here, it's actually, there we go. So I think it's poly, but you see how the spring normally here would just sit in that metal Oh, that's crunchy. And it still like doesn't fit very good.
Yeah.
But because we have this spring spacer, and then we have this nylon spring perch, it makes it a lot easier to line this up. So instead of having to like get the spring just right to where the spring notch fits with the notch in there and the notch on the top, you could put this one in here, but then we just rotate this to where it lines up on the top. So it's way, way easier that way. Now we need to put the control arm back in there and then reassemble everything. All right, so we had an issue where we realized we have two different shocks here for the front. I think Hotchkiss screwed up, and I'm gonna have to contact them and wait for them to answer and send me a shock and all that crap, which now postpones this project. So here's what we figured out. We were trying to put the shock on and we realized like, what the hell? We're using the one off the car that we haven't installed yet. These holes are too wide. Like the whole mount is too wide. What the hell? So we grabbed the other shock and we were like, okay. And then we realized either this is a defective shock or they put the wrong one in here, which I think is more the case, because comparing the part numbers, they are completely different. And normally I would be like, fine, let's go buy new shocks. These were not cheap. These were expensive shocks. They were like $130 a shock. So now I can put my passenger side together. I can do the whole left side too, and then the shock can, you know, obviously go on and off the car without it. So I'm not stuck. It's just now I gotta contact Hotchkiss on Monday and be like, dude, what the heck? And I'm not gonna elongate the hole either, because then I'm just taking material away, and that's dumb. So in typical fashion, this video ending is, I don't know, 2.5 weeks later, something like that. So you guys saw the way the video, well, the last clip, we had the Hotchkiss shocks where one of the trunnions or the mount on the bottom was wrong. I talked to Hotchkiss, confirmed with part numbers and stuff that they did indeed make a mistake. One of the reasons why this video has taken so long to finish is because I was waiting on Hotchkiss to make it right. Unfortunately, Hotchkiss has not made it right. I have a hard time recommending their customer service. They make good products, except when something goes wrong. I don't think you can really trust them to make it right. Specifically, a gentleman over there in customer service named Drew was supposed to stay in touch with me about getting it replaced. They've been out of stock on their shocks. However, what he was supposed to do was find another shock that they have that uses the same trunnion, remove it, send me the trunnion, that mount piece, and I was gonna press it in myself to get it up and running. Unfortunately, Hotchkiss did not stand by their product, and so I ended up purchasing 2 new shocks. They're still Hotchkiss. So yeah, it's. I went with Hotchkiss as I wanted the shock length to match the drop and the arms and stuff that are in the front. I did upgrade to a different shock though in the front. They're now adjustable rather than being a static shock like we had for the front. They're still the 1.5 made by Fox shocks. But yeah, I just wanted to put that out there like, look, stand by your product. And when you tell people you're gonna call them back and then people leave voicemails for 2 weeks like I've been doing, and not getting any responses whatsoever, yeah, that says a lot about a company. So I might actually upgrade the front later on to like QA1 or Ride Tech or something like that, just to kind of, I don't know, get the Hotchkiss products off here. I spent a lot of money on this front suspension, but let's go and show you how it turned out. So as you can see by looking underneath the front right there, see the big giant sway bar, it's all greased. There's the lower control arm. Upper control arm is up there, obviously. New end links, new hardware, new everything. These springs, like I said though, those are not Hotchkiss. The springs are BMR. So as you can see, there's the adjustable shock top right there. I do like the Hotchkiss adjustable ones because they're adjustable on the top and you don't have to remove them from the car to twist the entire shock body. And the QA ones have a knob on the bottom, but because the shock goes down through the spring, it's really hard to get your finger in there to actually adjust it. So here's the other side right here. It does get pretty close, as you can see, to the header right there, but it's not something I'm really that concerned about because all of this under here is changing to the LS7 that we talked about. In fact, that's what all these boxes are right here. Our product that has started arriving from Holley EFI for changing it over to an LS7 EFI. I know I said I was gonna go with a carburetor on this, but because of just wanting to be able to play around with tuning it myself and stuff, I went ahead and decided to go with Holley EFI. Holley reached out to us and actually are sponsoring all of the Holley EFI swap over stuff. So you guys will see a video when all the parts arrive. Like that's the EFI fuel tank, wiring harnesses, cross member for the transmission mount, because it's a different cross member you need when you go LS. HD 6-inch dash or screen, which we're gonna be doing a hideaway in the glove box for the computer and the dash and all that. And then there's a bunch of odds and ends that we are waiting on, like the intake. We got the MSD coils, coil relocation. There's a ton of parts that are coming that we need to do this LS swap. But anyway, that's that. The other thing too, remember I said that this car is broken because of the thing I did about shifting it into reverse while going forward, and I broke the transmission. I can still drive the car around at low speeds. And I've taken it around the block a few times since putting the new suspension on. Oh my God. Since we are sitting on a completely rebuilt rear suspension, all new shackles, new bushings, new leaf springs, new mounts, new reverse eyelet mounts, new bushings, and then the entire front being completely replaced, the entire car feels so insanely good. I also ordered wheels and tires for it. I'm gonna actually be having a dual purpose setup for this car. We'll be doing a drag pack with the drag tires in the back and skinnies up front, and a Pro Touring set of wheels and tires. Just like I've got 2 sets of wheels and tires for the ZL1, and I had 2 sets for the 370 as well. Mostly because of the track stuff that I do, I need different wheels and tires for the track, but I couldn't make up my mind on what I wanted to do with the 67, so I decided to do both, and then if I end up liking one way more than the other, then I'll sell the wheels and tires, make someone a good deal, you know, help their ride look better. But I also ordered a completely built Mosier rear end for this. We did do the Eaton True Track on the back, as you saw with the new gears and stuff. There's issues with my perch mounts. I've already showed you guys that it's corroded, it's flaking apart, it's a drum rear. And I was like, by the time I added up the cost of converting it to a disc rear end and then completely disassembling the unit, replacing the axles, getting it powder coated, putting the disc brakes, I think I already said disc brakes, doing the disc brake conversion and all that, and the new perches getting welded on, it was more cost effective to just decide to sell this GM12 bolt and then get a custom built Mosier unit for this. So it's all upgraded with the 1350 instead of the 1310 series pinion, and it was built exactly how we wanted to. So we'll be doing a video about swapping out that rear end. And then in the next couple weeks here, this car will actually be heading over to Red Barn Racing, where we will be building the LS7 and then doing the conversion, and I will be helping with that. That way we can get, obviously, as hands-on with the car as we can. So guys, sorry this video took so long to get out in the car channel, but I was waiting for Hotchkiss to make it right. Unfortunately, their customer service does not stand by their product. Anyway, if you guys know someone at Hotchkiss, share this with them because they need to hear it. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next car video.